Listen to me. Please listen. If you don't, if you won't, if you fail to understand, then the same incredible terror that's menacing me will strike at you!
Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel. We're talking about classic movies again today. Today we're looking at Invasion of the Body Snatchers from 1956. So this is the original that was adapted or based on the book by Jack Finney. It has the same title. So this is the story of Dr. Miles Bennell, who comes back from a medical convention, and some of his patients and his neighbors are like complaining that their family members have been replaced by imposters. So at first he kind of thinks that sounds crazy, but soon he and his girlfriend Becky are on the run from the pod people, which are people who've been replaced by emotionless plant-based clones of themselves, which are grown in a pod, hence the name Pod People. So this one was directed by Don Siegel, who went on to do Dirty Harry and things like that later on in his career. Don Siegel and Kevin McCarthy, who plays Miles, actually have a little cameo each in the 1970s Body Snatcher movie. So there's a little fun fact for you there. Of course, this is based on the book by Jack Finney. So the 1970s version that people know a little bit better has Donald Sutherland in it, and it's a really great movie with its kind of strange open-mouthed scream. It's a film that I personally know and love and rewatch quite a lot, and this is like a remake of this one, but the story itself about the body snatchers seems to be like a perennial kind of theme, because this film's been remade quite a few times. I think there's a 93-ish version and around 2004, but this one and the 70s one are kind of classics. So this film stars Kevin McCarthy as Dr. Miles. He had worked with director Don Siegel before, but he hadn't done much, so he was quite cheap to hire. And so was Dana Wynter, who played Becky. So she'd done like a lot of TV stuff, not a lot of movies. But this film was kind of a B movie, so it didn't have a huge budget at all. So they had sort of some big dreams about having other actors, but the two they got actually do a pretty good job in this film. In this version, it's bookended. So it opens with a man screaming in hospital, who's clearly gone kind of crazy. And we then find out who he is. He is Dr. Miles Bennell. And the plot of the film is kind of recounted by him as a flashback. Probably one of the most talked about aspects of this film is that it's often said to be an allegory, and the pods represent McCarthyism, communism, the pressure by society to conform, or the dangers of conformity. So from that perspective, it really resonated with people so much that my cat's here. It really resonated with people so much that calling someone a pod person became part of the just vernacular, the common speech. And it refers to somebody obviously who's just conformist and, sort of clone-like, I suppose. But that said, the director, the producer, the writer, and even the author of the original book all said that no, they just wanted to make a thriller, and this kind of theme just felt like it resonated. So I think that's kind of interesting. I think it's one of those things that you look back and you can see like what it could have meant to people watching it at the time, like what it could be representing, but it's not actually, wasn't actually originally designed to have the communist or McCarthyist kind of connotations. But it certainly represents something that was kind of in the social mind at the time. The ending is kind of bleak, which I kind of like in a horror movie. I suppose that's become a bit of a trope now, that, you know, the survivor survives, but then we get that little sort of stinger in the tail end of films now where, you know, it kind of all gets undone. We realize Jason isn't really dead or whatever. So in the book, originally, the aliens just leave the planet, which is a bit, kind of a bit silly, I guess. Like, they just decide it's a bit too hard and they go home. But in the film, the ending kind of gives us some hope, but kind of not. Miles is kind of wandering around, but originally he was going to be portrayed as, you know, wandering the streets with just trucks full of these pod people going past, like he's the last remaining sane person on the planet, which is kind of a pretty terrifying, isolating kind of idea. So B movies. This is probably, like, describing B movies and their history is probably a video in itself, but this was a low budget B movie, so it wasn't given an A+ budget, shall we say, and it was paired as a double bill with a film called The Atomic Man, which is a UK sci-fi kind of a jobby. The idea with B films is that they were often as a double bill, and the A movie would be played first, the B movie second, and the B movie would have a smaller budget, and was often a little bit more experimental. A lot of people got their start in B movies, but I mean, there's some really, this is a good film, a good B movie, but a lot of them are just sort of forgotten and have fallen by the wayside now. But yeah, they kind of started in the 30s when people didn't have much money, and they were designed to keep people coming into, like, a 2-for-1 situation that would keep people coming in. So yeah, that's a little B movie history for you. So yeah, is it a good movie? It's low budget, so when you kind of, I think a lot of you will have seen the 70s version of this film with Donald Sutherland, and that film is much more slick. It's a little bit tighter, but then films kind of were at that point as well. So this has a low budget, but by not using, I mean, there's like the pods and things like that, but by not having like a big, you know, big alien or some kind of creature that needed lots of special effects and things like that, they rely a lot more on plot and character, which kind of makes for a better film than you might otherwise get, which is pretty cool. I think the 70s version kind of builds a sense of dread a little bit better, but this version kind of expresses more to the future viewer. So watching it now, you get a sense of what people felt at the time. So you worry for these people, whereas I think in the 70s version you worry for yourself, because anyone could be a clone. You know, it's kind of like creates this idea of like, what if people that you know are not who you think they are? Whereas I think the 50s version, I mean, this is just my opinion, but I think the 50s version kind of gives you a sense more of how easily the tide could turn and things could change. I don't know. So the cast and the acting are kind of 50s sort of level cheese. They're not too bad. There's a funny bit where Becky, they're running away and Becky just kind of falls over. And I'm like, that is such a 50s trope, you know, she's running in heels and then she just kind of falls over. And they have this kind of low budget earnestness, but they're really not bad. It's less intimidating than, say, the 70s version or even just later horror and thriller kind of movies, but it still makes you think and gets under your skin a lot. I think like it really kind of shows you the 50s sense of unease, and a sense that non-conformity can mean death. So, you know, the 50s on the surface was very sort of American dream, home and family, post-war. And I think now looking back, we think of 50s, we sort of have an idea of what people were like and that life was kind of idyllic then. And a lot of that was like a veneer that covered a deep uneasiness that people had. So I think this film kind of expresses that, especially because the pod people look like normal people and they look like people you know. And I think they maybe do embody some of that McCarthyism of like, you know, somebody that you know might actually be an enemy. Like you could think that they're an enemy or they could think that you're an enemy. And also, as a species, people really need, like, it's kind of a biological function that we have where we need to belong. We might want to be rebels, we might want to be individuals, but we all need to belong, because not belonging can mean death, sort of in the wild, if you know what I mean. We're much safer in numbers. So this film kind of taps into that kind of primal sense of safety. Are you safe with the people around you, or, you know, do you have a place of belonging, or are you kind of an outcast? If you're conforming, are you safer, or are you basically an empty shell but alive? I don't know. I just think it's an interesting thing about people, that we are that way, and an interesting fear that this movie taps into that perhaps other films don't explore that much. So I think personally, I feel like this is a good Saturday afternoon kind of a watch, or even something fun to watch around Halloween, because it's kind of old school. But I don't think it will scare you as much as later versions of this film. Obviously, you know, with bigger budgets and things like that, will maybe get under your skin a little bit more, but it's certainly thought-provoking, and it's certainly an interesting film, sort of historically, in the realm of classic films. So that was my rather stilted review of this movie. I'd love to know what you think. If you've seen this one, if you like this one better than later versions, or if you have a favorite version, or anything you want to add. I'll see you guys in the comments, and thank you for watching.